Picture for a moment that you're standing between two families in the same city, under the same sky, breathing the same air. The first family awakens each morning with the crushing weight of unpaid bills piercing their minds like thorns. The father obsessively checks his bank account, counting pennies, calculating whether there's enough for rent, his elderly mother's medications, and food for his children. Anxiety devours his core, while his dreams evaporate like smoke in reality's cold wind. His children grow up witnessing this constant struggle, inheriting not just genes, but limiting beliefs about money. There's never enough. Rich people are evil. Money doesn't grow on trees. Just 3 blocks away, another family awakens with a tranquility that seems almost magical. Not because they're millionaire heirs, but because they've learned something the first family completely lacks. The father of this second family also works, also has responsibilities, but there's an enormous difference. His relationship with money isn't based on fear, but on ancestral principles that have been transmitted for millennia. His children receive not only formal education, but learn from an early age to see opportunities where others see problems, to create value where others see only scarcity. What separates these two families? Is it luck, university education, initial capital? The answer will surprise you as much as it surprised me when I discovered that a people representing less than 0.2% of the world's population controls approximately 20% of global wealth. It's not coincidence, it's not conspiracy. It's wisdom encoded in spiritual and practical principles that have survived persecutions, exiles, and catastrophes for more than 3,000 years. This wisdom has a name, the Kabbalah of Money. And when Napoleon Hill, author of Think and Grow Rich, studied the wealthiest men of his era, unknowingly he was documenting principles that had already existed in Jewish tradition since biblical times. The fire of genuine prosperity doesn't ignite by accident. It's fueled with specific combustible material that very few understand. Today you're going to discover the 7 secrets that have transformed a persecuted minority into a prosperous majority. Secrets not taught in schools, that don't appear in traditional economics textbooks, but are written on ancient scrolls and confirmed by modern success science. At the end of this journey, you'll wonder not only how to apply these principles, but why no one had told you about them before. The real question isn't whether these secrets work. The historical evidence is overwhelming. But whether you'll have the courage to implement them in your life, even if it means challenging everything you believed you knew about money, success, and prosperity. The ancestral revelation. For years I lived trapped in the same matrix of limiting beliefs that suffocates millions of people. I worked hard, very hard, but my financial results were pathetically disproportionate to the effort invested. It was like trying to fill a vessel with water without realizing it had holes in the bottom. Every dollar that entered escaped, and I blamed the system, the economy, my boss, everything except my own ignorance about the spiritual and practical laws that govern wealth. Everything changed during a casual conversation with my mentor, a Jewish entrepreneur who had built an empire from nothing after his family lost everything during World War II. While we drank coffee in his office, decorated with ancient books and photographs of 4 generations of his family, he told me something that struck me like lightning. The difference between those who prosper and those who struggle isn't in what they do, but in what they understand. And what they understand isn't learned in universities. It's transmitted from soul to soul, from generation to generation. That afternoon I discovered that the Kabbalah, that Jewish mystical wisdom that for centuries was reserved only for scholars over 40, contained financial principles more powerful than any modern investment strategy. But we're not talking about superstitions or esoteric rituals. We're talking about universal laws about energy flow, value creation, and building genuine wealth that coincide astonishingly with Napoleon Hill's research. Hill spent 25 years studying 500 of America's richest men. What he didn't know was that many of those magnates, from Andrew Carnegie to Henry Ford, had learned, consciously or unconsciously, principles that were already codified in Jewish sacred texts like the Talmud, the Mishnah, and Kabbalistic writings. The Kabbalah of Money isn't a get-rich-quick system. It's a complete philosophy that redefines the relationship between spirituality and material abundance. While most see money as something dirty or contradictory to spiritual elevation, Jewish wisdom teaches that money is neutral energy that becomes blessing or curse depending on the consciousness of whoever handles it. Imagine money as a powerful river. Those who don't know these principles try to swim against the current, exhausting themselves in the struggle. Those who understand the Kabbalah of money build channels, dams, and water wheels that transform the river's force into productive energy that benefits entire generations. But before revealing the 7 secrets that will transform your relationship with abundance, I need you to do something for me and for yourself. Subscribe to this channel and leave me a comment telling me what your biggest current financial challenge is, because I promise you that the 7th secret I'll reveal at the end will not only challenge everything you believe about money, but will give you a completely new perspective on why some families remain prosperous for centuries, while others struggle generation after generation. The principles you're about to discover have been tested not only in psychology laboratories and business schools, but in the most demanding laboratory of all, the historical survival of a people that has faced persecutions, expulsions, and genocides, but has always managed to rebuild and prosper. This isn't academic theory. It's wisdom forged in the fire of real experience. First secret, money as sacred energy. In the most ancient Kabbalistic texts exists a concept that will revolutionize your understanding of money forever. Hamamon Coach, money as life force. Jewish sages didn't see money as simple coins or bills, but as condensed energy that flows following precise spiritual laws, as exact as the physics laws that govern the material universe. Imagine for a moment that you can see money as Kabbalistic mystics do, currents of golden light constantly flowing through the world, connecting people, ideas, and opportunities. This energy seeks clean channels, prepared minds, and hearts aligned with the purpose of creating genuine value. It's not a poetic visualization, it's a deep understanding that radically changes how you relate to abundance. Napoleon Hill discovered this same truth when he wrote about the power of focused thought. Without knowing Kabbalah, he concluded that thoughts are things, and that the human mind can magnetize wealth when it tunes to the correct frequency. What Hill called mental vibration is exactly what Kabbalists termed elevation of consciousness to attract divine abundance. The first major mistake most people make is seeing money as something static, as if it were a finite resource that must be snatched from others' hands. This scarcity mentality creates energetic resistance that blocks the natural flow of abundance. It's like trying to make a river flow uphill. It simply goes against natural laws. Prosperous Jews have understood for millennia that money is a universal circulatory system. When you withhold it out of fear, it stagnates and corrupts. When you make it flow by creating genuine value for others, it returns multiplied like ripples in a pond. This understanding doesn't arise from greed, but from deep spiritual responsibility, being good stewards of the energy the universe entrusts to them. I vividly remember the story my mentor told me about his grandfather, a tailor who arrived in America without speaking English and with only $20 in his pocket. Instead of seeing his situation as a misfortune, he saw it as an opportunity to channel creative energy. He didn't lament what he had lost. He focused completely on the value he could create with his skilled hands and his knowledge of the craft. In 6 months, that tailor had not only paid his debts, but had established a reputation for excellence that attracted clients from other neighborhoods. His secret wasn't working longer hours. There were other tailors equally hard-working, but understanding that each stitch carried his personal energy, his intention to create beauty and functionality. Clients weren't just buying suits, they were buying the energy of excellence he put into each piece. This is the fundamental difference. Those who see money only as commercial exchange remain trapped in transactions. Those who understand it as sacred energy become channels of value that abundance actively seeks. Hill documented this phenomenon when he studied Andrew Carnegie, who constantly repeated that his wealth didn't come from exploiting steel, but from coordinating human energies toward constructive objectives. Carnegie had intuitively discovered the first Kabbalistic secret. Money flows toward those who become conscious organizers of productive energy. The most powerful exercise you can do to activate this first secret is to change your internal vocabulary. Stop saying "I need money" and begin affirming "I'm ready to channel greater value energy." Stop thinking there's not enough and focus on "How can I create more genuine value?" This apparently simple change reconfigures your subconscious mind to tune into abundance frequencies instead of scarcity. When you understand that money is sacred energy, seeking to express itself through you, you stop desperately chasing it and begin preparing your mind, your skills, and your character to receive it responsibly. And here comes the part that will change your life forever. Money's energy doesn't just bring material resources, but transforms your capacity to positively impact others' lives. Second secret, the transformative power of the committed word. In Jewish tradition exists a principle so powerful it can literally reorganize physical reality. Dibur shebe kedusha, the sacred word as creative force. The sages teach that God created the entire universe with words, and that human beings created in His image have the same creative power when our words are backed by absolute commitment and aligned with elevated purposes. This isn't an abstract concept or a beautiful poetic metaphor. It's a principle that Napoleon Hill rediscovered and called auto-suggestion, the ability of the conscious mind to influence the subconscious mind through statements repeated with emotional conviction. What Hill didn't know was that he was documenting wisdom that Jews had perfected for 3 millennia. I'm going to tell you the most impactful story I know about the power of the committed word. In 1945, a young Jew named Saul Goldman walked through the destroyed streets of New York after having lost his entire family in the Holocaust. He was 22 years old, didn't speak English perfectly, and possessed exactly $150 that a charity organization had given him. That night, standing before a broken mirror in a miserable room he shared with 3 other immigrants, Saul did something that would change not only his destiny, but that of thousands of families. He pronounced a declaration that sealed his future with words. "By my family's memory, by my people's honor, by my responsibility to future generations, I commit before God and before my soul to build a real estate empire that generates prosperity for hundreds of Jewish families." It wasn't desperate fantasy. It was a sacred commitment pronounced with the spiritual force his ancestors had used to survive in exile for 2,000 years. Saul didn't just believe in his words, he had sealed them with his soul, and that subtle but profound difference unleashed universal forces that the rational mind cannot explain, but experience confirms again and again. In 15 years, Saul Goldman had become one of America's most powerful real estate magnates. But the extraordinary thing wasn't his wealth, but how he had accomplished exactly what he declared that night before the broken mirror. He had employed and enriched hundreds of Jewish families, had financed schools, hospitals, and synagogues, and had created a legacy that transformed entire communities. The difference between a simple positive affirmation and a committed word lies in 3 elements that Kabbalah calls the pillars of creative power: clarity of intention, emotional intensity, and sacred responsibility. Hill documented these same elements when he studied the phenomenon he called burning desire, the burning desire that transforms thoughts into tangible reality. He observed that all the millionaires he interviewed had a common characteristic. They had made specific declarations about what they would achieve and had backed those declarations with emotional commitment so intense that their subconscious mind had no choice but to reorganize their perceptions and actions to make what was declared reality. But there's a crucial difference between Hill's technique and Kabbalistic wisdom. Hill emphasized the individual power of the mind. Kabbalah teaches that committed words connect individual will with universal forces that transcend personal limitations. When you pronounce a declaration aligned with elevated purposes, creating value, serving others, building legacies, you not only program your subconscious mind, but connect with what Kabbalists call hashgacha pratit, divine providence that coordinates synchronicities and opportunities. The most transformative exercise you can do right now is create your own sacred declaration. It shouldn't be a list of selfish desires, but a specific commitment about the positive impact you'll create in the world through your economic prosperity. Write it by hand. Kabbalah teaches that writing connects the 3 levels of consciousness: thought, emotion, and physical action, and pronounce it aloud every morning for 40 days. Here's the secret that will separate your declaration from the ineffective affirmations most people repeat. It must include not only what you're going to achieve, but also why you deserve it, how you're going to serve others with that abundance, and what legacy you're going to build for future generations. This structure connects your personal desire with universal purposes, and that connection is what unleashes real creative power. Remember that in Jewish tradition, words aren't simply sounds that come from your mouth. They're spiritual seeds you plant in reality's fertile field, and like every seed, they'll grow inexorably until they become the harvest you declared, as long as you water them with consistent actions and protect them from the weeds of fear and doubt. Third secret, education as generational heritage. There exists a 3,000-year Jewish tradition that has created more Nobel Prizes, more millionaires per capita, and more transformative innovations than any other culture in history. The sanctification of learning as supreme value. In Hebrew it's called Talmud Torah, study as a form of connection with the divine, but its impact goes far beyond the spiritual. It's the most powerful wealth-building strategy ever developed. Napoleon Hill identified specialized knowledge as one of the fundamental pillars of financial success, but didn't fully understand why some communities seem to generate successful people with statistically impossible frequency. The answer lies in a profound Kabbalistic concept, Da'at, knowledge that transforms the knower. I'm going to reveal a secret that forever changed my perspective on education and wealth. During a dinner at my mentor's house, I met his son, a 25-year-old who had just sold his second technology company for $8 million. As we conversed, I realized something extraordinary. That young man hadn't had a privileged education in exclusive schools, nor had he inherited initial capital from his family. What he had inherited was something infinitely more valuable, a family culture where learning wasn't an academic obligation, but a sacred obsession. Since age 5, he had been trained not only to accumulate information, but to ask the right questions, to identify hidden patterns, to connect apparently unrelated ideas, and to convert knowledge into practical value for others. In my house, he explained with a smile, the question wasn't what you had memorized that day, but what problem you had learned to solve, what new connection you had discovered, what value you could create with what you had just understood. This subtle but profound difference had programmed his mind from childhood to see opportunities where others saw useless information. Jewish tradition developed an educational system that modern psychologists consider revolutionary, learning through debate and constant questioning. Instead of memorizing answers, Jewish students learn to ask increasingly sophisticated questions. Instead of passively accepting information, they develop the ability to challenge, analyze, and improve any idea they encounter. This methodology creates minds that don't just consume knowledge, but transform it into constant innovation. And here's the secret that explains why Jews represent 22% of Nobel Prizes, despite being less than 0.2% of the world population. They've converted learning into a generational competitive advantage. Hill observed that the richest men of his era had a common characteristic: they never stopped studying. Andrew Carnegie read voraciously about metallurgy, psychology, and philosophy. Henry Ford constantly studied new production and organization methods. John D. Rockefeller analyzed every detail of his businesses and international markets. But what Hill didn't fully document was that these magnates didn't study just to accumulate information, but to develop what Kabbalists call chochmah, wisdom that sees hidden connections and universal patterns. It's the difference between knowing many facts and understanding how complex systems work. The traditional Jewish educational system teaches 3 levels of knowledge that, when mastered, guarantee prosperity in any field. Mikra, basic information; Mishnah, understanding patterns; and Talmud, ability to apply principles to new and complex situations. This structure creates minds that not only solve existing problems, but identify opportunities others cannot see. I remember a fascinating conversation with a Jewish entrepreneur who had built 3 successful companies in completely different industries: technology, real estate, and imports. I asked how he had managed to master such diverse fields, and his answer revealed the real power of Kabbalistic education. I didn't study specific industries. I studied universal principles about how complex systems work, how people behave under pressure, how information and value flow. Once you understand these patterns, you can apply them to any business. This is the difference between conventional education and transformative education. The former teaches you to do specific things. The latter teaches you to think in ways that allow you to create value in any context. And here comes the most powerful secret. Jewish tradition doesn't see education as a process that ends with a diploma, but as a sacred responsibility that lasts a lifetime. The Kabbalistic concept of tikkun olam, repairing the world, teaches that each person has the obligation to use their knowledge to improve reality. This perspective transforms learning from a selfish activity into a transcendent mission, and that difference in motivation unleashes levels of creativity and persistence that conventional learning never reaches. The most powerful exercise you can implement immediately is creating your own Kabbalistic curriculum. Identify 3 universal principles that govern your area of interest. Dedicate 1 hour daily to studying not only technical information, but philosophy, psychology, and thinking systems that expand your ability to see hidden connections. But remember that the true power of Jewish education isn't in accumulating academic degrees, but in developing the ability to convert any knowledge into practical value for others. That alchemical transformation, from information to innovation, from ideas to impact, is what creates genuine wealth that endures generations. Fourth secret, the sacred cycle of generosity. At the heart of Jewish prosperity beats a principle that completely challenges conventional economic logic, tzedakah, which doesn't mean charity as an optional act of kindness, but justice as sacred obligation to circulate abundance. The sages teach that withholding wealth when others need it is not only morally incorrect, but blocks the spiritual channels through which prosperity flows toward your own life. This revolutionary concept transcends traditional notions about donations and philanthropy. Tzedakah is a spiritual irrigation system. When you make your abundance flow toward those who need it, you create channels through which the universe can send abundance back to you, multiplied and purified. It's not commercial exchange, it's conscious participation in the circulatory system of universal prosperity. Napoleon Hill touched this truth when he wrote about the habit of giving more than you receive, but didn't fully understand the spiritual mechanism that makes it work. Hill observed that all successful millionaires had the characteristic of creating more value than they charged, but interpreted this primarily as business strategy. Kabbalah reveals it's a cosmic law. Abundance flows toward those who become generous channels, not toward those who accumulate it out of fear. I'm going to tell you a story that forever transformed my understanding of generosity. I met a Jewish entrepreneur who had arrived in America in 1950 with less than $100 and a family of 5 to feed. In his first months, while struggling to establish a small watch repair business, he made a decision his friends considered financial suicide, madness. Every Friday, without exception, this man separated 10% of his weekly income, even if it was only $10, and donated it to families needier than his. "My friends told me I was crazy," he told me with a smile. "How could I give money when my own children ate beans all week? But my grandfather had taught me that tzedakah isn't what you do when you have leftover money. It's what you do so you never lack money." During the first 6 months, that practice seemed an irrational economic burden. But something extraordinary began to happen. Clients arrived at his workshop without him having sought them. They offered him more lucrative jobs. Business opportunities appeared that he couldn't rationally explain. In 2 years, he had expanded his workshop, employed 5 people, and established a reputation that attracted clients from other states. It wasn't magic, he explained. It was spiritual physics. When you give with the right intention, not to receive recognition, but because you understand you're a temporary administrator of divine abundance, you become a reliable channel, and the universe sends more resources through reliable channels. Kabbalistic tradition teaches 8 levels of tzedakah, the highest being helping someone become self-sufficient. This concept is revolutionary. The most powerful generosity isn't giving fish, but teaching to fish, creating opportunities, sharing knowledge and connections that allow others to build their own prosperity. Hill documented this same principle when he studied Andrew Carnegie, who not only donated most of his fortune, but invested massively in public libraries. Carnegie had intuitively understood that the most transformative generosity is that which multiplies others' capacity to create value. He wasn't simply giving money, he was investing in the human potential of entire communities. But here's the secret that differentiates Jewish tzedakah from conventional philanthropy. It's not done out of emotional compassion or to feel morally good, but out of deep spiritual understanding about how the universal abundance system works. Prosperous Jews give because they know that giving is the most advanced technology for attracting prosperity. I vividly remember a conversation with my mentor about the most financially difficult moment of his business life. He had invested all his capital in a project that failed, was in debt up to his neck, and had bills he couldn't pay. His advisors suggested temporarily suspending his regular donations to conserve cash. That night I couldn't sleep, he told me. Not from fear of bankruptcy, but because I knew that if I stopped giving out of fear, I'd be cutting the spiritual cables that connected my business with universal abundance. The next day, instead of suspending his donations, he doubled them. I told the universe, I trust your system so much that I'm betting my last cash reserve that generosity opens prosperity channels. In less than 2 weeks, he received 3 unexpected job offers. A client paid a debt he had considered lost, and an investor he didn't know offered him capital for a new project. He not only emerged from the crisis, but that year ended up being the most prosperous of his career. This story illustrates the most counterintuitive Kabbalistic principle. True financial security doesn't come from accumulating resources out of fear, but from keeping flow channels active, especially during crises. Tzedakah is an act of practical faith in the spiritual laws of abundance. The most transformative exercise you can implement immediately is establishing your own tzedakah system. Commit a fixed percentage of your income, even if it's 3%, to help others become more prosperous. Don't see it as expense, but as investment in your own connection with universal abundance, and observe how changing from scarcity mentality to flow mentality reorganizes all other areas of your financial life. Fifth secret, the multiplying force of conscious community. In medieval European ghettos where Jews were confined by anti-Semitic laws and excluded from most professions, they developed a survival strategy that accidentally became the most powerful formula for creating collective wealth. Kahila, community as intelligent economic organism. This concept transcends simple cooperation. It's creating a collective mind that exponentially multiplies individual capacities. Napoleon Hill rediscovered this principle when he documented what he called master mind, the coordination of minds focused toward common objectives. What Hill didn't know was that Jews had perfected this social technology for 1,000 years of persecution, creating mutual support networks so sophisticated they could rebuild collective prosperity after any catastrophe. The difference between a simple contact network and an authentic kahila lies in 3 elements that transform individuals into an unstoppable collective force: sacred mutual responsibility, specialized knowledge exchange, and shared vision of generational prosperity. I'm going to tell you the most extraordinary story I know about the power of conscious community. In 1938, a group of 12 Jewish families arrived in a small Texas town fleeing persecution in Eastern Europe. They had no capital, didn't speak English perfectly, and the local economy viewed them with distrust. Any objective observer would have predicted they would struggle individually to survive. But these families brought something more valuable than money: ancestral knowledge about how to create collective prosperity. The first night in America, they gathered in a rented house's basement and established what they called Hachaver Hakalkali, the sacred economic circle. It wasn't just a support group. It was an intelligent organism designed to multiply each member's opportunities. Each family contributed their specialized knowledge. One was a tailor, another had experience with metals, a third knew agriculture, another mastered financial mathematics. But instead of competing among themselves or working in isolation, they created a system where one's success automatically benefited all the others. The tailor didn't just repair clothes, he became the group's social ambassador, learning each client's needs and problems, information he shared with the other members. The farmer didn't just grow vegetables, he researched what products were scarce in the region and coordinated with others to create supply chains. The mathematician didn't just keep his own accounts, he analyzed collective investment opportunities and taught financial principles to all members. In 5 years, those 12 families had not only prospered individually, but had transformed the entire city's economy. They had established 17 interconnected businesses, employed more than 100 people from the local community, and created a level of prosperity that attracted investments from neighboring cities. The extraordinary thing wasn't their individual success, but how they had designed a system where each business's growth automatically strengthened all the others. The tailor recommended the farmer's products to his clients. The farmer directed buyers toward other members' stores. Everyone shared contacts, opportunities, and specialized knowledge. It was like having 12 brains working on each problem, explained the son of one of those pioneers. When my father faced a challenge in his business, he didn't struggle alone against the difficulty. 11 additional minds analyzed the problem from different angles, contributed diverse experiences, and together they found solutions none would have discovered individually. This is the power of the Kabbalistic mastermind. It's not simply cooperation or traditional networking, but creating a collective intelligence that transcends individual limitations. Hill observed the same phenomenon when he studied alliances among magnates like Carnegie, Ford, and Edison, but didn't fully understand he was documenting a spiritual principle that Jews had codified in their culture. Kabbalistic tradition teaches that when two or more people unite with elevated purposes and genuine mutual responsibility, they create what's called Shekhinah, divine presence that multiplies human capacities. It's not abstract mysticism, it's advanced social technology that generates measurable results. But here's the secret that differentiates an authentic mastermind from a simple commercial partnership. It must be based on spiritual principles, not just economic benefit. Members must be committed not only to their own success, but to the growth and well-being of all other participants. I remember a fascinating story my mentor told me about a group of 8 Jewish entrepreneurs who formed a mastermind circle in the 80s. They met every 2 weeks, not to do direct business among themselves, but to analyze each member's challenges and contribute collective perspectives. The most important rule, he explained, was that each member had to arrive at meetings focused 100% on how to help the other 7, not on promoting their own projects. This inversion of mentality, from taking to giving, created a level of trust and collaboration that unlocked extraordinary opportunities. In 10 years, the 8 members of that circle had multiplied their average income by 5, but more importantly, they had created a network of interconnected businesses that employed more than 500 families and had generated 3 innovations that transformed their respective industries. The most powerful metaphor for understanding this principle is that of glowing coals. A single coal extinguishes quickly, but when several coals are kept together, each feeds the other's fire, creating a flame that can last all night. Conscious community works the same way. Individual minds stay lit and focused when connected with other minds committed to elevated purposes. The most transformative exercise you can implement immediately is identifying between 3 and 7 people who share your commitment to personal and financial growth, and proposing the creation of a mastermind circle with regular meetings focused exclusively on collective progress. But remember that the real power of Kahila isn't in what you can obtain from the group, but in what you can contribute to multiply everyone's capacities. When you change from competitive mentality to collaborative mentality, you discover that shared success is infinitely more powerful and satisfying than any individual achievement. 6th secret: discipline as freedom technology. At the center of Jewish life exists a practice that for 3 millennia has trained minds to master impulses, plan long-term, and create sustainable abundance. Shabbat, 24 weekly hours of complete disconnection from work, money, and material productivity. To external observers, It seems an irrational economic limitation. To those who understand its power, it's the most advanced self-discipline technology ever developed. Napoleon Hill identified self-discipline as the most important mental muscle for financial success, but didn't discover the most effective method to develop it. Hill wrote about the importance of controlling thoughts and emotions, but Jewish tradition had created a practical system that trains these capacities every week throughout life. Imagine that every 7 days, for 24 complete hours, you voluntarily disconnect from everything that generates immediate income. You don't answer business emails, don't make calls to close sales, don't review investments, don't plan commercial strategies. For a mind trained in scarcity mentality, this seems a catastrophic economic loss. But here's the secret that transforms this apparent limitation into absolute competitive advantage. Shabbat trains your mind to distinguish between urgent activity and genuine productivity, between frantic movement and strategic progress. When you regularly force yourself to stop all commercial activity, you develop the ability to see your business from broader perspectives, identify patterns that daily immediacy obscures, and make decisions from mental clarity instead of reactive anxiety. I'm going to tell you a story that forever changed my understanding of discipline. I met an Orthodox Jewish entrepreneur who had built a software company billing $50 million annually. The extraordinary thing wasn't his business size, but that he worked strictly Sunday through Thursday, disconnecting completely every Friday at sunset until Saturday night. My competitors worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, he explained with a smile. They thought they had an advantage because they dedicated more time, but I had learned something they didn't understand. Real productivity isn't measured in hours worked, but in correct decisions made from mental clarity. Every Saturday, while his competitors continued answering urgent emails and putting out operational fires, he disconnected completely. His mind freed itself from the tyranny of the immediate and entered a state of deep reflection that allowed him to see strategic opportunities others couldn't perceive. Monday mornings, I returned to work with perspectives my competitors took weeks to develop, he told me. While they remained trapped in daily operations, I could see market movements, identify emerging trends, and make strategic decisions that left them wondering how I had anticipated changes that were surprises to them. This is the deepest paradox of authentic discipline. Voluntary limitations create extraordinary freedoms. When you train your mind to say no to immediate impulses, you develop the ability to say yes to strategic opportunities that require long-term vision. Hill documented this same principle when he studied the most successful magnates of his era. He observed they all had strict routines, disciplined schedules, and the ability to resist temptations that distracted their competitors. But what Hill didn't fully understand was that discipline isn't painful repression, but systematic training to develop genuine freedom. Kabbalistic tradition teaches that there are 3 levels of discipline that radically transform the relationship with abundance: Tiferet, balance between giving and receiving; Gevura, the strength to say no to what doesn't serve; and Chesed, generosity that flows from authentic abundance, not from emotional need. These 3 levels create a self-discipline system that isn't based on ascetic denial, but on deep understanding about which activities and decisions create genuine value versus which simply create the illusion of progress. I vividly remember a conversation with my mentor about the most successful period of his business career. For 5 years, he explained, I followed an apparently irrational routine. I worked intensively Monday through Thursday, disconnected completely on Fridays, dedicated Saturdays to study and reflection, and used Sundays for strategic planning. His competitors considered this routine a competitive disadvantage. They told me I was losing opportunities, that the market didn't wait, that I had to be available 7 days a week. But the results spoke for themselves. During those 5 years, his company grew 400%, while most of his competitors struggled to maintain stable margins. The difference, he explained, was that I had learned to work from strategic discipline, not from reactive anxiety. While they desperately ran after every apparent opportunity, I had developed the patience and mental clarity to identify real opportunities that justified time and resource investment. This story illustrates the most counterintuitive secret about authentic discipline. It's not resisting temptations by willpower, but developing mental clarity so deep that distractions simply lose power over you. When you genuinely understand which activities create real value, saying no to everything else becomes automatic. The most transformative exercise you can implement immediately is creating your own version of Shabbat. 24 weekly hours where you disconnect completely from commercial activities and dedicate time exclusively to reflection, study, and strategic planning. But remember that the real power of Jewish discipline isn't in following external rules, but in developing self-knowledge so deep that your decisions flow from internal wisdom, not from external pressures. That mental freedom is the foundation upon which all genuine and sustainable prosperity is built. Seventh secret: generational vision as infinite wealth strategy. At the heart of millennial Jewish prosperity lies the most powerful and least understood secret: Ledorot, the sacred responsibility to build abundance that transcends your own existence and flourishes for generations. While most people plan for the next months or years, prosperous Jews have been trained for millennia to make decisions thinking about the impact they'll have on their great-grandchildren. This transformative temporal perspective isn't simply advanced financial planning. It's a complete reconfiguration of consciousness that converts every economic decision into an investment in humanity's future. Napoleon Hill touched this truth when he wrote about the importance of having a major purpose that transcends personal benefit, but didn't fully understand the multiplying power of thinking in terms of centuries, not decades. I'm going to reveal the most impactful story I know about the power of generational vision. In 1850, a Jew named Abraham Goldstein arrived in a rural California region with his wife and 3 small children. He had enough money to buy only 5 acres of apparently worthless land. It was arid terrain, far from main commercial routes, without easy water access. His neighbors considered that purchase a disastrous investment, but Abraham had made that decision based on a deep Kabbalistic principle, Einod Milvado, the understanding that all crises are opportunities disguised for those who can see long-term patterns. Abraham didn't buy that land to solve his immediate